Hello everyone, this is AJ and welcome back to the channel and welcome to my revisit review series of the classic Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine, my favourite of all the Star Trek series. That's why I am starting with this one. Yes, now the episode we're looking at today is called A Man Alone, so let's talk about it. Now this is episode 4 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, if you include the pilot as a two-parter. So this episode here was originally aired on January 17th of 1993 in the United States. Story by Gerald Sanford and Michael Piller, with a teleplay by Michael Piller, and was directed by a Paul Lynch. I actually went to work with a guy named Paul Lynch years ago. Not this Paul Lynch, because it was around this time I was working with him. There we go. Always... yeah, I remember that. So, let's talk about this episode and then I'll give you my thoughts on it. Let's get into it.
Voyage to Deep Space Nine, where Security Officer Odo confronts a notorious criminal from his past.
He went to prison for murder. I sent him there.
On the next Star Trek, Deep Space Nine.
Okay, so Odo's become worried at the number of new people arriving at Deep Space Nine due to the newly discovered wormhole. While talking with Quark in his bar, Odo observes a man he recognises and demands he leave the station. The man refuses and the two get into a fight that is broken up by Station Commander Sisko. Odo explains to Sisko that the man is a fella called Ibudan, who was a smuggler of goods to Bajorans during the Cardassian occupation. Though considered a hero by some, Odo states that Ibudan let a young girl die when her parents could not afford the smuggled goods and later killed a Cardassian officer. He has since gone free after the end of the occupation. Sisko warns Odo that he cannot take action against Ibudan without any evidence of a crime being committed. Later, Ibudan is found dead in one of Quark's holosuits. One of Ibudan's friends reports to Sisko and Major Kira that Ibudan was afraid Odo would kill him. No DNA is found at the scene, but Ibudan's murder, other than that of Ibudan and the officers investigating the crime. The general populace of the station start to become suspicious of Odo, whom they consider untrustworthy due to his unknown origin as a shapeshifter and his association with the Cardassian regime. Sisko temporarily relieves Odo of duty as head of security. Dr. Bashir discovers that Ibudan was performing medical experiments on a strange material in his quarters despite having no training as a doctor or scientist at all. The crowds on the station form and become more hostile towards Odo, who is forced to hide in his office to avoid a mob forming outside. Bashir suddenly arrives with new evidence. Ibudan's medical sample has started to grow into a clone of Ibudan. Sisko, Bashir and Odo determine that the murdered Ibudan was also another clone set up to incriminate Odo. They discover the real Ibudan hiding on the station and Odo arrests him for the murder of his clone, but receives no apologies from the inhabitants of the station. The episode also has a side plot involving DS9's operations chief Miles O'Brien, whose wife is struggling to find her place on the space station of Deep Space Nine, and isn't getting used to living there because she's unable to follow her interests as a botanist. So she decides to start a school to teach the children residing on the station. So that's a breakdown of the plot, really, of the episode. And I've got to say, I'm really enjoying revisiting this series at the moment. I know I'm in a few episodes in, but I'm finding them fresh, I'm finding them well written, and this episode isn't without exception in that. Now, obviously this episode focuses primarily around Odo, because we're at that stage in this series where we're getting to know the characters, we're getting to introduce to the characters of the show. Now, interestingly, there are some wonderful scenes within this episode, right? This is the first time that we really see what would become the relationship between Odo and Quark. These two characters, even though they're sort of rivals, they need one another, they thrive off of one another. And you see a scene where Odo's in his office and Quark comes in, but Quark comes in and he's kind of sort of mocking Odo for what's going on, but at the same time offers him a sort of help. He does it and says that he's done a little bit of research behind Odo's back into Ibadan while he was in prison, and but he unfortunately didn't find anything out that could help Odo. So you see this relationship forming where, you know, Quark looks up to Odo. Quark, you know, has a strong sort of respect for Odo, because Quark knows that without Odo, Quark wouldn't be as good a criminal as what he is. He has to sort of step up and really be on top of his game where Odo's concerned, because Odo is always on him. And this relationship grows throughout the entirety of Deep Space Nine, and it's great to see those sprinklings of it here in this episode. The stuff with Keiko O'Brien, fantastic stuff, right? As you remember, she was a botanist on board Deep Space Nine. On board the Enterprise in her time on Star Trek, but she has nothing to do here. So they've written in this storyline where she starts to open a school, and it's great to see the coming together of like Nog and, you know, more with Nog and Sisko's son, and yeah, it's nice stuff. And Sisko's look on Sisko's face when the school opens at the end, you know, the smile that he gives and this sort of thing when the kids are coming in, just wonderful stuff. Not only that, we do get a bit of time spent with Sisko and Dr. Bashir, where Sisko invites Dax to lunch, but at the time Dr. Bashir's got his back to Sisko, and the Doctor thinks that the invite was for him, so he agrees, and then Dax turns down the lunch, so Sisko ends up having to go to lunch with Dr. Bashir, and says to Dr. Bashir, look, if you want to go after, you know, sort of chase after Dax for a relationship, then feel free to do that. You know, just great stuff. The thing is, looking at the character of Dax as well, it's sort of more relevant than ever now, because Dax is like, you know, essentially a sort of precursor to transgender, if you know what I mean. Or I know it, you know, it was a thing back then, but not as much as what it is now, because she is a female that was previously a male because of the symbiote inside. So it brings a whole new sort of side to that character now, and watching that character, and it's really good stuff. The episode itself is intriguing. Again, Avery Brooks steps up as a character of Sisko, the point where he's telling Odo that if you can't do your job, I'll get someone else to do it, you know, if you're not, and having to lay down the law with Odo and saying to him, look, you can't, you know, and Odo's reaction, you can't investigate this case because you're the primary suspect, and Odo's reaction to it, it's just wonderful stuff, because you get this tension between the characters as well, because they come from different sides, because it isn't just Starfleet. These are, Odo was someone who worked alongside the Cardassians when they occupied DS9, and he was there then, and he's there now, and adapting to the Federation running things, and yeah, just great stuff. And you know, it's not a special effects heavy centric episode, it's all character driven, and a wonderful episode as well. And yeah, really enjoying it. So next episode is an episode called Babel, and we'll talk about that one. So this is AJ. I'll see you on the next one. Take care all, and goodbye.